Hey everyone, this is Dr. Drizzle and welcome to the National Parks Expedition Challenge. Today we're very honored to be here at the Flight 93 National Memorial with my new friend Gregory. This is going to be a little bit of a different virtual field trip for us because we're going to be just a little bit more reverent. This is a beautiful place and we're going to find out why this place was created. So Gregory, thank you so much for being here with us today. Can you tell me just a little bit about how you got to this particular park?
Well, I started out at Harpers Ferry as a volunteer. I was working on my master's degree at the University of Duquesne, and I went down there to work on a story about John Brown and the Raiders back right before the Civil War. And then from there, I got a seasonal job up at Fort Necessity, and then from there, I went up to Allegheny Portage Railroad working for America's Industrial Heritage Project to teach the story of coal and steel making and railroads to children in Pennsylvania here. And then I got on as the park historian and then the park education specialist. And I was invited down here in 2016 to create education programs to tell the story of Flight 93 and the brave passengers who fought back against the terrorists that day.
Well, so a lot of your job is telling stories to get people to understand things. So can you tell us about this place, Flight 93?
I can tell you about this place. It's when I first came down, I was a little skeptical about coming down to work a park like this because I do a lot of things with music and theatrics and puppet shows and things. And being this is a solemn story, it becomes a task or a challenge to teach young kids, young children, about what happened because it's a horrible story. You're talking about a day in American history where 19 terrorists took over planes, flew those planes into buildings to murder people. And we had almost 3,000 people die that day. So to take that story and to tell it to the youth of America, older kids you can talk about the terrorism, but the younger kids, what we deal with is heroism and talking about the heroes of Flight 93, the 40 heroes, the 40 personalities, what they did to help one another, what they did to help the nation by fighting back against the terrorists and bringing the plane down here, unfortunately, in this field behind us.
So can you give us just a little bit of what happened that day?
Well, on that day, this particular plane was flying out of New Jersey. It was on its way to San Francisco, California. And on that plane, there were 4 terrorists who took over that plane. And when they were up in the sky and they moved all the passengers to the back of the plane, they weren't really watching them. And those passengers and crew members got on telephones. There were phones on the back of the seats, these Verizon Airphones. Some of them used cell phones, but most of them used these Verizon Airphones. And by calling their loved ones and finding out what was happening in America, they took a vote and they decided to fight back. See, the terrorists were trying to trick them and tell them that the plane was being hijacked, that they were heading back to the airport in Newark, and that wasn't the case. And once they called and were talking to their family members and who were telling them that they're watching planes crash into buildings on television, they're saying that they're terrorists, they're saying that Osama bin Laden is behind it, they knew that they had to act. And I like to use a quote by Albert Einstein. The world is a dangerous place, not because of those who do evil, but because of those who look on and do nothing. And the passengers and crew of Flight 93, they voted to do something, and they fought back and saved maybe thousands of lives in Washington, D.C., where this plane was headed.
So I have to think that the family members had something to do with that too, because I remember reading that the family members, although heartbroken, were supporting their loved ones on the plane.
Yes.
Encouraging them to do the right thing.
Yes. Some of the people on the plane and talking to their loved ones, they were encouraged to do something by their loved ones on the other end of the phone.
So we know that kids would love to visit a lot of the national parks. If they were to come here, what would they find?
Well, if they came here to the park, we have certain features. Over here to my right is the actual flight path of the plane. So the plane would have flown in this direction. And I like people that when they come here, they realize what they're looking at. You're walking on the flight path of the plane. You go out to the overlook. Down below us is a boulder that marks where the plane hit the ground. So those are important features. At the park entrance, we just had finished up the Tower of Voices, 93-foot tall, 40 wind chimes. It will be the largest musical instrument in the world. It will play music. When the wind blows and the different chimes hit, it'll actually play songs to remind us of the courage of the passengers and crew. I say that it's the first thing you see and hear when you come into the park, and it's the last thing you see and hear when you leave the park. So any people that come here, whether it's school kids or just travelers, and we also have a nice museum that tells a story behind these walls behind me. So lots to see, lot to do, and we do offer educational programs to school kids to come here to teach a story of what happened that day.
Well, Gregory, it's a beautiful story for a bad reason, but
Yes.
it allows us to reflect and think about how amazing our world was on September 12th as we were all coming together. I remember after 9/11, the next day we were scared and we were nervous, but people were coming out of everywhere to be those helpers.
This is true.
I know that Mr. Rogers says if you're looking for something after a tragedy has happened, look for the helpers, look for the people that are helping.
Right.
So we have kids that are interested in national parks. Like they want to come and do this at some type of national park site. We know there's over 420 of them. What could you tell our students that are watching? What can they start preparing now to do to get your job someday?
Well, I think a love of history, a love of nature and things outdoors. I tell people that to be a park ranger, you don't necessarily have to do things mainly associated to rangers, but we have biologists, anthropologists, architects, all sorts of different duties and jobs that you can do in becoming an employee of the Department of Interior and the National Park Service.
And you also use your theatrical experience in music. You told me just a little while ago that you've written some soundtracks.
I have. Up at Allegheny Portage Road in Johnstown Flood, where I used to work, I wrote some songs. I did a CD called Men of Steel, story of Pennsylvania's working class heroes. And then I did another one called Murder on the Ridge about the villains who would rob the fellows who the blue-collared workers. So I write a lot of songs about the area of Pennsylvania. I haven't written anything yet about Flight 93. It seems too soon to me to do that. And if I do write one someday, I would want it to be just right and come from my heart. So I haven't done that yet, but as I said, music, theatrics, puppet shows, things like that, I have used in the other parks that I worked. So here it's a challenge. It's a challenge because of the nature of what the story is about, but I find that with the younger kids, if you key on heroism and what they did, and also just living a person's life to its fullest, because what I've learned from working here, that there's a saying, tomorrow is promised to no one. And if you go in the visitor center, and I usually use the one spot in the visitor center to make this point, in the back of the visitor centers, there's almost 3,000 names of everyone that died that day. In the airplanes that were up in the sky, the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and such, there are almost 3,000 names. So when you say that saying, tomorrow is promised to no one, all of those names on that wall, when they got up in the morning, they took a shower, they brushed their teeth, they washed their face, maybe they boarded a plane, maybe they went up an elevator to World Trade Center, maybe they sat behind a desk at the Pentagon. It was their last day on Earth. So what's important in life? Your health, your family, your friends, your God, if you believe in God, your country. These are things that one should put first in their life and live each day to its fullest. And be kind.
Well, Gregory, you're an amazing ambassador for this place and for national parks, and I would say
Thank
just
you.
for humans in general. Kids, usually we give out a challenge, a STEM challenge for our National Parks Expedition, but today I'm just going to say be kind, do good, find someone to honor, tell someone that you love them, because as Ranger Gregory said, we don't know when our last day is, so live it to the fullest. This is Dr. Drizzle from the Flight 93 Memorial Park, out.